Welcome to Lord of Limbo, where the unknown finds its voice. Today, we bring you real accounts that defy logic and test the limits of fear. Stories of ordinary people who have experienced terrifying and inexplicable events. Whether at work, at home, on the road, or during a simple outing, the unexpected can emerge when you least expect it. Get ready to dive into yet another chilling episode. And remember, not everything can be explained. My name is Peter. I was stationed on a Navy vessel, a standard amphibious assault ship, some years ago. We had been deployed on a routine mission, crossing some relatively calm waters far from any coastlines. There was nothing particularly noteworthy about this mission at first, but that would change one evening in a way I will never forget. I'm writing this now, years after the fact, but the memory still feels as vivid as it did back then. I've kept it to myself, mostly. I don't want to sound insane, but there are some things that just don't make sense. It started on the 5th day of our deployment. It was around midnight when I was posted on the bridge for a late watch. The ship was moving slowly, which, in retrospect, might have been the first odd thing about the whole experience. The water was too still, unnaturally so, like something was holding it in place. Normally, even on the calmest nights, you could feel the ship's hull cutting through the water. But tonight, it felt like the ship was floating on some kind of thick, impenetrable surface. I remember looking out at the horizon, the darkness stretching on forever. The only sound was the gentle hum of the ship's engine and the occasional creak of the deck as the ship adjusted to the water's pull. My job that night was to monitor the radar, but everything seemed normal. No other vessels in sight, nothing on the horizon. Just the vast emptiness of the ocean stretching around us, lit by the dim, yellowish glow of the bridge's lights. For the most part, it was a quiet shift. But then, I noticed something strange on the radar. At first, I thought it was a glitch, just a small blip, moving too slowly to be another ship. It wasn't really on course, either. It just hovered there, shifting slightly. The longer I stared, the more I became convinced it was something real, something out there. I mentioned it to the officer in charge, but he just brushed it off. He said it was probably a bird or a weather phenomenon. Maybe a glitch after all. But I couldn't shake the feeling. I stepped outside onto the deck to get a better look, feeling a sense of unease creeping up my spine. There's something about being out there on the open sea at night that gets to you. The isolation. The pitch-black water all around, with nothing in sight except the faintest outline of the ship itself. The air had that salty, almost metallic taste to it, and the wind had picked up a bit, though nothing too alarming. As I looked out at the water, that's when I saw it, just beyond the bow. A shape. A large shape. I couldn't make it out clearly, but there was something there, just beneath the surface. It was hard to describe, like a shadow moving beneath the water, but it wasn't a creature in the way you'd think of it. It was as though something unnatural was moving down there. It wasn't the shape of a fish or a whale, but something that didn't belong, something out of place. I called out to one of the other sailors nearby, but when he looked, there was nothing. Just the open sea again. I started to wonder if I was imagining it, but it wasn't just that, something felt off about the entire night. The atmosphere was wrong. The radar continued showing that strange blip, hovering in place, but no one else seemed as concerned as I was. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. I kept going back out to the deck, checking over and over, hoping it would go away. Each time, the shape seemed to shift a little, but never far enough for me to clearly make it out. It wasn't until around 3 a.m. that things escalated. The ship's engine stuttered. Just a quick, brief sound of them cutting out for a split second. I'm sure some of the crew heard it, but when we asked the engineers, they said everything was fine. Just a minor glitch. but I wasn't convinced. There was an eerie calm that followed. We drifted for a long while, silently, as if the ocean itself had stilled. That was when I heard it. The sound. It came from below the water, deep beneath the hull. A long, low hum. It vibrated through the ship like a warning, so deep and guttural it felt like something ancient was trying to make contact. I can't fully describe it, like a whale song, but distorted, like it had been twisted through time or space, not belonging to this world. My heart started pounding in my chest. I ran back to the radar station. There, I noticed something even stranger. The radar blip had expanded. It had multiplied. There were now several. They were scattered across the screen, moving in random, erratic patterns, but they all seemed to be heading toward the same point. And they weren't slowing down. I felt a surge of dread. These weren't ordinary contacts. There was something deliberate about them. Something purposeful. I informed the officer again, and he finally looked at me with more seriousness. We ran through the usual protocols. We tried calling out over the radio, but the signals seemed to fade the closer we got to whatever was out there. As we neared the point where the radar contacts were gathering, the temperature on the ship started to drop. I felt a chill on the back of my neck, and then the lights on the bridge flickered. We came to a halt. I was standing there in stunned silence, watching as the radar displayed several moving shapes now grouped together, right under the ship. I could hear the hum again, louder this time. It was almost deafening, vibrating through the steel of the ship. And then, without warning, there was a splash. A huge splash. As if something massive had breached the surface just beneath us. I've heard that sometimes the ocean can play tricks on your mind, but this wasn't like that. There was something real down there. Something alive. But not like anything I'd ever seen before. We quickly started moving the ship, unsure of what we had just encountered. We didn't speak about it much after that. When I tried to bring it up to some of the others, they'd either dismiss it or claim they hadn't heard anything. But I knew what I heard. I knew what I felt. Later, when we were back at port, the crew got together for the usual debrief. They said there were no reports of anything unusual, no glitches in the radar, no strange sounds. Nothing. But I saw the looks in their eyes. We all knew. Deep down, we all knew something had been out there, something that had followed us for a long time. That was the last time I ever went out on a mission like that. Afterward, I stayed away from the sea. Every time I close my eyes, I hear that hum again, just beneath the surface of the water, waiting. The sea holds secrets that some things were never meant to know. And whatever it was we encountered that night, it still feels like it's out there, somewhere. Story 2. My name is Dean. It was the middle of our deployment, a routine patrol in waters I had sailed through countless times before. This wasn't my first time at sea, and I've never been one to get spooked by the endless expanse of water surrounding us. But what happened on that night, I don't think I'll ever truly understand. It wasn't like anything I had ever encountered in my years of service. No storms, no rough seas, just an unsettling calm that left me on edge for days. We had been stationed on a large destroyer, the kind that could take a beating and keep going. The atmosphere aboard was as standard as it gets, people going about their duties, the low hum of the engines in the background, and the usual chatter of the crew. But it was the night shift that changed everything. I was assigned to the deck, in charge of keeping an eye on the ship's perimeter and any unusual radar signals. For the most part, the night was clear. There was a slight breeze, and the ship cut through the water with its usual hum. Nothing out of the ordinary, until I noticed something off in the distance. A light, but not like any of the usual markers or buoys we'd come across. This was different. It was flickering, like a firefly trapped in the ocean, barely perceptible and hard to pinpoint. It caught my eye because it was moving, but not in a way that made sense. It wasn't a boat or a plane, no pattern or course. It just drifted. I reported it to the bridge, but as expected, they shrugged it off. They said it was probably just a fishing boat far off, the light reflecting off the water in strange ways. I didn't buy it. Something about it felt wrong. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something watching us from out there. That's when it got worse. About an hour later, the radar started acting up. It wasn't a malfunction, this was different. We kept picking up a strange pattern, something moving out there in the dark, too large to be a single vessel but too erratic to be anything ordinary. At first, I thought maybe we were getting interference from a storm somewhere. But there wasn't a storm. There was nothing on the horizon. And then it moved closer. It wasn't a direct approach, but it was too fast to ignore. Every time I checked the radar, it was a little bit closer, no clear shape to it, just these disorienting, chaotic patterns. I couldn't stay on the deck forever, so I went inside to speak with the officer in charge. He gave me that look, the one where he knows I'm serious, but he still doesn't believe me. I think part of him wanted to laugh it off, but there was something in my voice that made him stop. I'm not the kind of guy who panics, and he knew that. So, we decided to go on high alert. We doubled the crew in the control rooms, making sure everyone was keeping an eye on the radar. And that's when we heard it. At first, it was faint, just a low, pulsing sound. Almost like a hum, but not mechanical, not like the ship's engines. It was rhythmic, deep, and almost felt like it was coming from the water itself. The closest comparison I can make is the sound of an underwater drilling rig, but much, much lower. It was unsettling, vibrating through the ship in a way that made it feel like the very ocean was alive. It was about 3 a.m. when things really escalated. The hum grew louder, almost deafening, and that's when we all felt it, a sudden drop in temperature. The air turned heavy, thick with humidity, but cold. The hairs on my neck stood up as I looked out into the night, where everything seemed still and unnaturally silent. Not a single sound from the sea or the sky. The usual creaks of the ship, the little noises you get used to, were gone. I stepped outside onto the deck again. The night was nearly pitch black, but I could still make out the faintest outline of the ship's wake stretching behind us. And then, there it was. Not far off, but close enough that I could see it with my own eyes, a figure in the water. It wasn't a person. It wasn't anything like that. It was just a shape, moving through the water with disturbing ease, like it was gliding just beneath the surface. I tried to make sense of it. Was it a whale? A school of fish? No. It wasn't moving like anything I'd ever seen before. It wasn't natural. There was no way to explain it. I've been at sea enough to know the difference between the way an animal moves in the water and the way this thing moved. I felt my stomach drop. The air felt too thick, like I couldn't breathe. The figure was no longer a shadow beneath the surface. It had surfaced slightly, enough that I could see it moving just under the waterline. It wasn't big, nothing that could pose a threat in terms of size, but it was wrong. The shape was long and undulating, like something far too alien to even comprehend. It wasn't a sea creature, that much was clear. It was something else. I rushed back to the bridge, adrenaline pumping through my veins. The radar was going crazy now. These signals, these erratic blips, were all clustered in one spot, and every single one seemed to be heading toward us. No one had an explanation, no one knew what to do. We tried calling it in, but the radio just kept cutting out. It was like something was interfering with our communications. The hum was louder now, almost vibrating in my chest, and I could see some of the crew starting to get visibly uneasy. We were about to make a sharp turn, to get away from whatever was approaching, but before we could, the ship gave a sudden jolt. Just for a moment, but enough to throw people off balance. The water around us churned, and then it stopped. Everything fell silent again. The radar showed no signs of anything out there anymore. But we could feel it. Something was still there, watching us. The rest of the night was a blur. I don't remember how long we sat there, just staring into the abyss, waiting for something to happen. It never did. By the time we returned to port, everything seemed to settle. No strange signals. No signs of anything out of the ordinary. But I can't forget the feeling. The hum, the cold, the shape beneath the water. I never spoke about it much to anyone. I wasn't sure how to explain what happened, and part of me didn't want to know. All I know is that whatever it wasn't from this world. And I think it was waiting for us to notice it. But some things are better left unseen, you know? That was the last time I felt safe at sea. I've been back out there since then, but there's always that nagging feeling in the back of my mind. Every time I look at the water, I wonder what else is out there, waiting, just beyond the surface, in the cold, dark depths. I don't think I'll ever get the answer. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to. If you've made it this far, thank you for tuning into another episode of Lord of Limbo. What would you do if you went through something like this? Have you ever experienced something terrifying? Leave it in the comments, because the unknown might be closer than we think. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more dark tales. We'll see you in the next video, if you're still here.